In the world of Pharmadyne, power moves in silence, and the invisible remain unseen. Amelia Cross, a self-made entrepreneur, trades her polished CEO title for a janitor's uniform, stepping into her company as an unseen observer. But what begins as a quiet mission to understand its fractured culture becomes a race against time to expose sabotage, embezzlement, and the toxic leadership of Victor Greaves, a man determined to bring the company to ruin for his gain. With the legacy of her grandmother fueling her resolve, Amelia endures casual racism, condescension, and whispers of layoffs, all while collecting the evidence she needs to dismantle the corruption from the inside out. But Victor won't go down without a fight, and when he uncovers a secret that ties Amelia's past to the company's very foundation, everything she's built and fought for hangs in the balance. Will Amelia expose the rot at Pharmadyne's core and lead her company into a new era of justice and respect? Or will Victor's lies and the weight of the past bury her dreams forever? Amelia Cross tugged at the oversized janitor's uniform that felt heavy on her shoulders. It wasn't the weight of the material, but what it symbolized. She was trading power and prestige for invisibility, a role she knew too well from her past. The sleek, glass facade of Pharmadyne headquarters loomed before her like a palace guarding secrets. As she entered through the back door reserved for maintenance staff, the stark divide between the pristine executive floors and the dimly lit, narrow janitorial corridors hit her. The air smelled faintly of bleach and despair. Her supervisor, a wiry man named Joe, handed her a mop. "You're on the 3rd floor today. Conference rooms and hallways. Stick to your tasks, keep your head down, and we won't have problems." "Understood," Amelia said, her voice calm. As she wheeled her cleaning cart into the elevator, Amelia silently observed the peeling paint in the maintenance area compared to the glossy marble of the main lobby. Every detail reinforced her purpose. Uncover the cracks in this empire and repair them, piece by piece. The 3rd floor conference rooms buzzed with activity. Executives in tailored suits discussed strategies, oblivious to Amelia's presence as she swept near the doorway. Her ears perked up when she heard a familiar voice. Victor Greaves, sharp-suited and self-assured, spoke with an arrogance that grated on Amelia immediately. "We need to tighten the budget, Richard. Layoffs are inevitable. Start with the lower-level staff, janitorial, maintenance, admin. Do we really need this many of them?" Richard Owens, the CEO, hesitated. "Cutting too deep could affect morale, Victor. The workers." Victor waved him off. "Morale? Richard, this is business. Efficiency doesn't care about feelings. Trim the fat, or this company sinks." Amelia paused mid-swipe, her jaw tightening. Victor's tone wasn't just dismissive, it was dehumanizing. "I'll draft the proposal," Victor added, his smirk widening. "Trust me, no one will miss the invisible ones." As they walked away, Amelia gripped the mop tighter. Invisible? Not for long, she thought. Later that afternoon, Amelia took a moment in the break room to catch her breath. The space was cramped, with mismatched chairs and a vending machine that clunked loudly whenever it dispensed a snack. A group of employees chatted at the counter, their voices hushed but audible enough for Amelia to overhear. "Have you seen the new janitor?" Jennifer, an administrative assistant, asked, tossing her glossy hair over her shoulder. "Yeah," said Tim, a junior intern. "She doesn't say much. Probably doesn't even speak English." The group laughed, and Amelia's chest tightened. She kept her gaze fixed on the chipped mug in her hands. Jennifer continued, "You know what I heard? They're talking about layoffs again. Bet they'll start with the janitors. I mean, why keep so many when they're barely noticeable?" Another round of laughter. Amelia stood and returned to her cart. The bitterness of their words was sharp, but it wasn't unfamiliar. She'd heard worse in her climb to the top. Amelia was wiping down a desk near the administrative offices when a soft voice startled her. "Here, take this. You look like you've been at it all day." She turned to see a petite woman with kind brown eyes holding out a steaming cup of coffee. Amelia hesitated but accepted. "Thank you. I'm Sophia. I work over there," the woman said, gesturing toward a cubicle. "Amelia," she replied simply, keeping her voice measured. Sophia smiled. "Let me know if you need anything." I know this place can be rough. Amelia nodded, watching Sophia walk away. In a sea of indifference, her kindness stood out like a beacon. That evening, Amelia took a detour to the factory floor. The buzz of machines and the clatter of assembly lines filled the air. Workers moved like cogs in a massive machine, their faces drawn with exhaustion. One man struggled with a faulty piece of equipment, his frustration evident as the supervisor barked at him to work faster. Amelia lingered, pretending to clean a nearby table, and noted the worn tools and unsafe conditions. Another day, another disaster. One worker muttered to his colleague, "Tell me about it," the other replied. And they wonder why productivity's down. Amelia's heart ached for them. These were the people who built the company's foundation, yet they were treated like afterthoughts. She left the factory with a renewed determination. Change had to come, and it had to start with her. The boardroom on the top floor radiated power. Sleek leather chairs surrounded a long glass table, and the walls were lined with screens displaying graphs and financial figures. Amelia entered with her cleaning cart, her uniform granting her invisibility among the executives. Victor Greaves stood at the head of the table, gesturing to the screen behind him. "We're hemorrhaging funds," he said, his voice carrying a tone of smug authority. "The solution is clear: layoffs. Start with non-essential staff." "What about investment in new products?" asked Richard Owens, the CEO, his voice uncertain. Victor scoffed. "Innovation takes time we don't have. Cutting costs will show the board immediate results." Amelia pretended to wipe the corner of the table, positioning herself to listen more closely. "We could outsource janitorial services entirely," Victor continued, ignoring the uneasy glances around the table. "Why pay full salaries when we can hire a third-party company at half the cost?" Amelia's hands clenched around the rag, but her face remained neutral. The discussion revealed not just a lack of innovation, but a disregard for the workforce that kept the company running. As the meeting concluded, she wheeled her cart out of the room, her resolve hardening. If these executives thought they could strip the company of its humanity, they were wrong. That evening, Amelia found herself back on the third floor, cleaning near Sophia's desk. The administrative assistant was hunched over her computer, her face tight with worry. "Long day?" Amelia asked softly. Sophia looked up, startled, then relaxed when she recognized Amelia. "You could say that," she sighed. "Rumors are flying about layoffs. People are scared." "Honestly, I'm scared." Amelia leaned on her mop, encouraging her to continue. "I'm a single mom," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly. "If I lose this job, I don't know how I'll support my son. He's in daycare during the day, and without my paycheck," she trailed off, shaking her head. Amelia nodded, her chest tightening. "That must be tough." Sophia offered a sad smile. "I'm used to tough, but it's still exhausting." Amelia admired Sophia's resilience, and their quiet conversation reminded her of why she was fighting to save the company. For people like Sophia, dedicated, hardworking, and deserving of more. The next day, Amelia was wiping down a glass wall near Victor's office when she heard his sharp voice. "Hey, you." She turned to find Victor standing in his doorway, glaring at her. "Yes," she said evenly. "This trash can has been full for hours," he snapped, pointing to the bin by his desk. "Do your job." Amelia walked over, inspecting the trash can. It was barely a quarter full. She bent down and tied the bag, her movements measured. As she replaced the liner, Victor muttered, "I don't know why we even keep so many janitors around. Waste of payroll if you ask me." Amelia straightened, meeting his gaze for a split second. "Is there anything else you need?" Victor waved her off dismissively, already turning back to his computer. Amelia walked out of the office, her hands trembling with suppressed anger. She reminded herself that her time would come. Later that evening, Amelia was cleaning near the finance department when two voices caught her attention. "We need to move the remaining funds by Friday," one man said. "The offshore accounts are ready," replied another. Amelia froze, her heart pounding. She ducked into a nearby alcove, straining to hear more. "Victor wants the transfers done before the quarterly report. Keeps the numbers clean," the first man added. "Smart," the second replied. "By the time anyone notices, we'll be long gone." Amelia's mind raced. She had suspected corruption, But this was confirmation. Victor and his allies weren't just cutting costs. They were siphoning funds and setting the company up for failure. She waited until the voices faded, then returned to her cart. She needed evidence, and she needed it fast. Back in the janitorial closet, Amelia sank onto a stool, her mind replaying the events of the day. The weight of her mission felt heavier than ever. She pulled out the small photograph she kept in her pocket, a picture of her grandmother standing proudly in front of the modest house they had shared. Her grandmother's lessons echoed in her mind. Stand tall, even when they don't see you. Work hard, even when they don't value you. Change what you can, and leave the rest better than you found it. Amelia took a deep breath. She was here for a reason, and she wouldn't let Victor, or anyone else, destroy what her grandmother's generation had worked so hard to build. With renewed determination, she stood and prepared for the next day. The cracks in the facade were growing, and soon, the whole structure would come tumbling down. The hum of machinery grew louder as Amelia stepped onto the factory floor, her cleaning cart trailing behind her. The air smelled of oil and metal, and the faint chatter of workers mingled with the clank of equipment. Amelia moved methodically, sweeping debris near the conveyor belts. A worker struggling with a jammed machine caught her attention. Sweat dripped down his face as he muttered curses under his breath. "Need a hand?" Amelia asked, keeping her tone light. The man blinked, surprised. "You? No offense, but this thing's a beast. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps," she said, crouching beside him. With a few quick adjustments, the machine whirred back to life. "Hey, thanks," he said, offering a sheepish grin. "I'm Luis. Been here 10 years, but these machines are older than I am." "Amelia," she replied. "Are they always this unreliable?" Luis nodded. "Yeah, management keeps saying they'll replace them, but we've been hearing that for years. We just make do." Amelia stored the information away. Faulty equipment wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a liability that could cost the company dearly. That evening, Amelia sat at her small desk in her apartment. The glow of her laptop screen illuminated the stack of documents she had smuggled out of the office. As she scrolled through spreadsheets and emails, patterns began to emerge. A ping from her phone broke her concentration. It was a call from Sophia. "Hey, Sophia," Amelia answered. "Sorry to bother you so late," Sophia said, her voice tinged with anxiety. I needed to vent." "Go ahead," Amelia said, leaning back in her chair. "They're cutting hours," Sophia said. "I'm barely making enough as it is. And Tim, one of the interns, told me he overheard Victor talking about outsourcing more departments. I feel like I'm hanging by a thread." Amelia's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. That's awful. But you're not alone in this." "Thanks, Amelia. It just feels like the people at the top don't care. We're just numbers to them." Amelia's resolve deepened. "They'll care soon enough," she said, more to herself than to Sophia. The next morning, Amelia found Sophia in the break room, staring at her phone with a furrowed brow. "Everything okay?" Amelia asked. Sophia sighed. "It's my son's daycare. They just raised their rates. I don't know how I'm going to cover it." Amelia thought for a moment. "What if I helped you find a scholarship program? Some organizations offer financial aid for working parents." Sophia's eyes widened. "You do that?" "Of course," Amelia said with a smile. "I'll look into it tonight." As they chatted, Sophia began to open up about her life, her son, and her dreams of going back to school someday. Amelia felt a genuine connection growing between them. Later that day, Amelia found an opportunity to confront Richard Owens in the hallway outside his office. The CEO looked frazzled, his tie slightly askew. "Mr. Owens," she began, her voice steady, "do you have a moment?" Richard glanced at her, puzzled. "Do I know you?" "Not exactly," Amelia said, lowering her voice. "But I know you're aware of what's happening here. The corruption, the layoffs, the mismanagement." Richard stiffened. "That's a bold accusation." "I have proof," Amelia said, producing a flash drive. "Emails, financial records, and more. Victor and his allies are bleeding this company dry." Richard hesitated, then sighed. "I've suspected as much, but Victor's a dangerous man to cross. So you let him destroy the company?" Amelia asked, her tone sharp. Richard looked away. What do you want from me? Your support when the time comes to confront him, Amelia said. This company needs real leadership, not fear. After a long pause, Richard nodded. I'll consider it, but be careful. Victor doesn't play fair. That night, Amelia began reaching out to external auditors and legal advisors. She knew the battle ahead would require more than just evidence. It would take strategy and allies. As she sent her final email of the evening, she glanced at the photo of her grandmother on her desk. This is for you, she whispered, and for everyone they think doesn't matter. Amelia closed her laptop, feeling the weight of the coming confrontation. The seeds of change had been planted, but the real fight was only just beginning. Amelia found Sophia sitting in the break room, her head buried in her hands. A crumpled piece of paper lay on the table in front of her. Amelia approached cautiously, setting her mop aside. Hey, Sophia, what's wrong? Sophia looked up, her eyes red. They're cutting hours in my department. Again, I'm already barely scraping by as it is. How am I supposed to pay for daycare or even rent if this keeps up? Amelia's heart ached for her friend. I'm so sorry, she said, pulling up a chair. Did they give any explanation? Just the usual corporate nonsense, Sophia replied bitterly. Budget constraints, cost-saving measures. It's like they don't even see us as people. Amelia reached out, squeezing Sophia's hand. They'll see soon enough. I promise you that. Sophia smiled faintly, but doubt lingered in her eyes. Amelia's resolve solidified. She would make sure no one else felt this powerless again. Victor's voice echoed through the hallways as Amelia wheeled her cart past the executive offices later that day. I don't care what Richard says, Victor barked into his phone. We need to move on this now. Layoffs aren't optional if we want to stay afloat and keep the board off our backs. Amelia paused, pretending to clean the nearby glass panels as she listened. Yes, Victor continued. I'll handle Owens. He's too spineless to resist. By the time he figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. Victor hung up and stormed into his office, slamming the door. Amelia's mind raced. It was clear Victor was tightening his grip, using the fear of layoffs to manipulate the board and Richard Owens. She needed to act before his plan gained more momentum. That evening, Amelia stayed late, slipping into the office where confidential meetings were often held. She knew the cleaning schedule gave her a window of opportunity to search the room undisturbed. Her hands trembled slightly as she rifled through the papers left on the table. Among the scattered documents, she found a folder marked Budget Reallocations. Inside were detailed plans to shift company funds into accounts labeled Operational Reserves, but the transactions didn't add up. Amelia frowned, scanning the pages. Offshore accounts, she murmured to herself. Victor's fingerprints were all over these plans. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Amelia quickly shoved the papers back into the folder. She grabbed her mop and began cleaning the table just as two executives entered. Can you believe Victor's plan? One of them said, shaking his head. The other shrugged. He's bold. I'll give him that. But if this backfires, we're all screwed. Amelia kept her head down, her heart pounding as they continued their conversation. She had what she needed, proof that Victor was orchestrating a financial scheme to siphon money from the company. The next morning, Amelia found Sophia sorting through files at her desk. Hey, do you have a minute? Amelia asked. Sophia looked up and nodded. Sure. What's up? Amelia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I need some insight into the company's financial systems. Is there anyone you trust who handles sensitive information? Sophia frowned. Why? What are you looking for? Let's just say I'm trying to make sense of some discrepancies. Amelia replied cryptically. Sophia thought for a moment. There's Jamie in accounting. He's sharp and keeps his head down, but I've heard him complain about things not adding up in the books. That's perfect, Amelia said. Do you think you could introduce me? Sophia gave her a curious look. Amelia, what are you up to? Something that needs to be done, Amelia said simply. Back in her apartment that night, Amelia laid out everything she had gathered. Documents, notes, and recordings of conversations she had overheard. The pieces were coming together, forming a damning case against Victor. She picked up her phone and dialed Richard Owens. "Mr. Owens, it's Amelia Cross," she said when he answered. "Amelia? I thought—" "Listen to me carefully," she interrupted. "I have evidence that Victor is stealing from the company and setting you up to take the fall. If we don't act now, everything will collapse." There was a long pause on the other end. "What do you need from me?" "Your cooperation," Amelia said firmly, "and your willingness to stand with me when I present this to the board." Richard sighed. "You're putting us both at risk, you know that?" "I do," Amelia replied, "but it's the only way to save this company." After a moment, Richard said, "All right, let's do this." Amelia hung up, her pulse steady. The stage was set. Now it was time to bring Victor's empire of deceit crashing down. The tension in the air was palpable as Amelia pushed her cleaning cart into the boardroom. The executives sat around the sleek glass table, Victor Greaves at the head, smug and self-assured. Victor glanced at Amelia as she entered, his expression a mixture of annoyance and dismissal. "Can't this wait until after the meeting?" Amelia didn't flinch. "Actually, no," she said, her voice steady. The room fell silent as she stepped forward, abandoning the cart. From her pocket, she pulled a folder containing the evidence she had painstakingly gathered. "I think it's time we had a real discussion about this company's future," Amelia said, placing the folder on the table in front of Victor. He stared at her, then laughed dismissively. "What do you think you're doing? You're just the janitor." Amelia's gaze hardened. "I'm also the owner of this company." Gasps rippled through the room. Victor's face paled as he snatched the folder and flipped through the pages. "This is a joke," he stammered. "No," Amelia replied calmly. "This is the truth. I've spent weeks observing how this company operates, from the factory floor to this very room. What I've found is corruption, negligence, and greed. And I have the evidence to prove it." Victor recovered quickly, slamming the folder shut. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, his voice rising. "In fact, it raises questions about you. Who are you? Really? And how did you end up in this position?" Amelia stood tall. "I built my business from the ground up. My acquisition of this company was legitimate, and I have nothing to hide." Victor smirked. "Are you sure about that?" He reached into his briefcase and produced a stack of documents. "Because I've uncovered something very interesting about your past." He slid the papers across the table. "Your grandmother worked for the family that originally owned this company, didn't she? What a coincidence that you'd end up here, claiming ownership." Amelia's jaw tightened as she scanned the documents. They were falsified, twisting her grandmother's history to suggest Amelia had unfairly leveraged old connections to gain control of the company. "This is desperate, even for you," Amelia said coldly. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Desperate? Or just the truth? Maybe the board should question your integrity before taking anything you say seriously." Amelia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You're right about one thing, Victor. The board should question integrity. Yours." She turned to the other executives, her voice firm. "In that folder is evidence of Victor's embezzlement. Offshore accounts, falsified budgets, and layoffs designed to cover his tracks. He's been siphoning money while blaming others for this company's decline." Victor shot to his feet. "That's a lie." Amelia ignored him. "I've already shared this information with legal authorities. And as the majority owner of this company, I'm exercising my right to terminate anyone involved in this scheme." 2 security guards entered the room, their presence silencing the growing murmurs. Amelia fixed her gaze on Victor. "You're fired. Effective immediately." The room erupted into chaos. Victor's protests were drowned out as the guards escorted him from the room. News of the boardroom confrontation spread quickly. In the break room, employees gathered in small groups, whispering about the upheaval. Sophia found Amelia near the coffee machine. "Is it true? Did you really fire Victor?" Amelia nodded. "It's true, and it's just the beginning. This company needs to change, and it starts with holding people accountable." Sophia's eyes filled with hope. "Does this mean things are going to get better for us?" "That's the plan," Amelia said with a small smile. "But it's going to take all of us to make it happen." Later that evening, Amelia stood outside the CEO's office. The brass nameplate bearing Richard Owens's name had been removed, leaving an empty space on the door. An assistant approached, carrying a new nameplate. She handed it to Amelia, who ran her fingers over the engraved letters. Amelia Cross, CEO. With a sense of purpose, Amelia placed the nameplate on the door. This wasn't just a title. It was a promise to herself, her employees, and the legacy of her grandmother. As she stepped into her new office, the city skyline stretched out before her. Amelia knew the fight wasn't over, but she had taken the first step toward building a company that valued every voice. Amelia stood in front of her desk, a file folder in hand. Across from her, Sophia Martinez sat nervously, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sophia," Amelia began, her tone warm but professional. "I've been watching how dedicated you are to this company, even during the toughest times. You've been an inspiration, not just to me but to everyone around you." Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you, but I'm just trying to do my job." "You've done more than that," Amelia said with a smile. She slid the folder across the desk. "I want you to take on a leadership role. This is a promotion to team manager. You'll have a bigger platform to make the changes we both know are needed." Sophia's eyes widened as she opened the folder, reading the details. "Are you serious?" "Me? Absolutely," Amelia replied. "Your voice deserves to be heard, and this company needs leaders like you. People who care." Sophia's face broke into a radiant smile, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Amelia said, grinning. "Yes. 100 times, yes," Sophia replied, laughing through her tears. The buzz of machinery filled the factory floor as Amelia and her newly assembled leadership team walked through, clipboard in hand. Luis, one of the senior workers, approached hesitantly, wiping his hands on his overalls. "Miss Cross, you wanted to see me?" he asked. Amelia nodded. "Yes, Luis. I've been reviewing your suggestions about the equipment issues, and I want to thank you for your honesty." Luis raised an eyebrow. "You're thanking me?" "Absolutely," Amelia said. "Starting next month, we'll be replacing the outdated machines and implementing new safety protocols. I'd like your input to ensure the process goes smoothly." Luis looked stunned. "I've been asking for these changes for years. I didn't think anyone was actually listening." "Well, I'm listening now," Amelia said firmly. The workers around them began to murmur, their faces lighting up with cautious hope. For the first time, they saw action, not just promises. Victor Greaves's fall from grace was swift and public. Legal proceedings exposed his embezzlement schemes, and headlines painted him as the epitome of corporate greed. Amelia watched the news from her office, a mix of satisfaction and sadness settling in her chest. Richard Owens stepped into the room, his expression subdued. "They're saying Victor might face jail time," he said. "It's what he deserves," Amelia replied, her voice even. Richard nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you for giving this company a chance when I couldn't." Amelia turned to him, her gaze steady. "Richard, this isn't just about the company. It's about the people who keep it running. You forgot that, but it's not too late to make amends." He nodded again, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. "I hope I can." That evening, Amelia sat alone in her office, a framed photograph of her grandmother in her hands. The city skyline glittered outside the window, but her focus was on the memories the photo evoked. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Never let anyone tell you your work doesn't matter. You see the cracks they don't, and you'll be the one to fix them." A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Sophia, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "I just wanted to say thank you," Sophia said, placing the flowers on Amelia's desk. Amelia smiled. "You don't need to thank me. You earned this." "I think we all earned this," Sophia said. "Because of you." Amelia's chest swelled with pride and gratitude. "Let's keep earning it together." The next morning, Amelia stood at the podium in the company's largest conference room, facing a crowd of employees. The energy in the room was a mixture of anticipation and hope. "Thank you all for being here," Amelia began, her voice strong and clear. "This company has been through a lot. We've faced challenges that could have broken us, but we're still standing. And today, we're starting a new chapter." Applause erupted, but Amelia raised a hand to quiet it. "This isn't just my company, it's ours. Together, We're going to rebuild it into something we can all be proud of. A place where every voice matters, every role is respected, and every person feels valued. She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing the glimmers of hope and determination. "Let's make this the company we all deserve," Amelia said, her voice filled with conviction. The room erupted into cheers, and Amelia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like a future worth fighting for.